All right, hello and welcome from the National Brain Tumor Society. It is 12 p.m. Eastern, so let's get started. During this installment of the Public Policy and Advocacy Educational Web Training Series, we will discuss concrete activities that advocates can utilize throughout the year to develop and maintain relationships with their members of Congress and their staff. I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through before we begin. To minimize background noise, we will have all webinar participants muted. However, we do want this to be an interactive training, so please ask any questions you may have by utilizing the chat feature on your Zoom screen. Lainey will just, I think she just sent a chat, so it will pop up on your screen and we'll show you where to look for that chat feature. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the training, either directly to Lainey or to the whole group, and we will do our best to answer all questions following the main presentation during the Q&A session. If you have a question that you think of later or is not answered during the webinar, please feel free to email us at advocacy@braintumor.org anytime. We will also be recording this training, so it will be accessible online within a handful of days, and we'll email the link in a follow-up email to all of our advocates. My name is Casey Troy, and I'm the Research and Advocacy Manager here at the National Brain Tumor Society. Joining me on this web training today are my public policy and advocacy colleagues, Lisa Peabody, our public policy associate, and Lainey Titus-Samont, our director of advocacy. We're delighted to be joined by a couple of special guests. Kevin Mack is the district director of Maryland Congressman John Delaney, and he'll provide some insider tips and tricks, as well as our own Stephen LaFond, the Digital Communications and Marketing Manager here at NBTS, and he'll share tips for engaging on social media. All right, let's jump in. So first, I'd like to direct you to our public policy and advocacy section of our website. Sorry, we have a reverberation here. Thanks, Lainey. Okay, so the public policy and advocacy section of our website is shown here on your screen. We provide a deeper dive into public policy, advocacy, and general guidelines for building relationships with your members of Congress. And you can access the website by, clicking this tab. If you search on this tab, if you click on the Your Voice section, that will lead you to all things advocacy. And then there's the tools and training section, which is where you'll find our previous web trainings. We have an Advocacy 101 and a Building Bridges web training to how to give a deeper dive to building relationships with your members of Congress. And then a comprehensive guide for in-district meetings will be found at this link that I just highlighted, the in-district meeting toolkit. We suggest that all advocates view these web trainings as well as the one you're on now, whether you've been active for a number of years or are just joining the program now. They're really helpful guides for all advocates. A common question is, what really is brain tumor public policy advocacy? And public policy advocacy includes a variety of activities which have the ultimate goal of making a change to policies that affect the brain tumor community. Examples are calling your senators to ask if for them to vote for a bill investing in medical research funding, or writing your members of Congress an email about the access or the right to life-saving medication. Each time you make a phone call or send an email to your members of Congress to ask them to support a certain piece of legislation or support the brain tumor community, you are participating in public policy advocacy. The National Brain Tumor Society is always keeping an eye out for upcoming bills and legislation that might affect the brain tumor community, and we determine our legislative agenda based on the needs of our community. We also work with other coalitions and alliances in our public policy activities. We need our members of Congress to support the brain tumor, research funding, and to support legislation that positively impacts the brain tumor community. Our members of Congress are in place to act on behalf of their constituency. And so for them to effectively do their jobs, they need us to teach them about the unique challenges and experiences of brain tumor patients and families. We need them to make informed decisions about changes to research in the treatment landscape and to support future innovations in medical research funding. Brain tumor advocates build working relationships with Congress and are a source of information on our policy agenda. You bring your own experience as a brain tumor advocate and speak for the brain tumor community on a personal level. The key to successful brain tumor public policy advocacy includes sharing your unique brain tumor experience. So explain challenges for a brain tumor patient and their family. Tell your story and connect how public policies might affect you and other brain tumor patients and their families. Make a personal, emotional, and local connection with your members of Congress and their staff, and persuade Congress to support our public policy agenda by being a respectful squeaky wheel. So they need to hear from us consistently to reinforce our public policy agenda. With that said, I'd like to welcome our guest, Kevin Mack. Kevin is the District Director for Congressman John Delaney. His education includes a BA in Political Science from UCLA and a Master's in Political Management at George Washington University. Kevin first volunteered with John Delaney for Congress in 2012, and he'll give us some insider tips and tricks for maintaining a collaborative relationship with your member of Congress and their staff. Thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, Lainey. I really appreciate it. As Lainey said, I am Kevin Mack. I work for Congressman John Delaney, Maryland 6th Congressional District. We're right outside of the Washington, D.C. Beltway. So we're pretty close to the Capitol, obviously. And Congressman Delaney's been serving since 2013. This is his third term. I have been working for the congressman since before he was elected as a volunteer, and he hired me in his congressional office. It's been an absolute privilege to serve the congressman and the constituents of the 6th Congressional District. And I had an opportunity in my role to meet Lisa Peabody. And Lisa has come in and advocated on behalf of the National Brain Tumor Foundation. And she has been an incredible voice for this organization. And she wanted me to talk about a little bit, how do you maintain and develop these types of relationships with your members of Congress? What I want to go over first right now is talk to you a little bit about what my district office does versus the Hill office. Down here, out here in the district, I'm basically responsible for the constituent relations, any casework issue that comes along, community outreach, and also keeping my ear to the ground on anything that might be going on in the community that is of concern to the congressman. It can be if we have a flooding up in Western Maryland, or it could be the politics of some local politics, road situations, anything along those lines. You want to keep your ears to the ground, and you meet with a variety of different people from advocating on various issues. We do not get lobbied as much since we're so close to DC, and a lot of people can just make a quick trip down to DC and lobby the congressman directly and his staff down there. Most places around the obviously, if you live in, let's say, California, you're going to establish it's not as easy to get to DC, obviously, and you want to establish those strong relationships with your district team, your district representatives. What we do on a day-to-day basis is we're pretty much out there in the community, hearing what's going on and handling any casework that comes in. And then down in DC, we have a legislative team that is broken into, we have about 6 or 7 people down there, and they handle their own specific legislative areas. I have a healthcare legislative aide, Michelle, who I deal with on all healthcare related issues. And she's the person that will tell me that we have an issue going on with NIH funding, or we have an issue with National Cancer Institute funding, and what are you hearing on the ground? Has anybody contacted you about this? Has anybody said what's going on? Or conversely, if somebody comes and talks to me, like Lisa did, I want to talk to her and said, okay, I had a constituent come in and talk to me about this issue. This is what's going on. Where's the legislation stand right now? Where is the congressman stand on this? Can we get the congressman to sign on to a bill, etc.? So a lot of this crafting of legislation obviously is done down on the Hill. They have a lot more resources and in-depth knowledge of policy on healthcare than I do. I don't get that deep into it, but I'm also able to tell them when things are shifting in the community and moving, and it becomes important that, the congressman needs to focus in on this. It's in terms of what the advocacy of this, the National Brain Tumor Society, this is in some regard it's non-controversial. Everybody, it's a bipartisan issue. Republicans, Democrats are the ones all want to jump in and work on NIH funding, healthcare, research, etc. So this is not a controversial issue when you're coming into lobby. So it's a lot easier for me to work with my DC staff and talk to them about, okay, this is what we need help with. This is what we need to have the congressman sign on. In general, I've had people come in and lobby me about climate change and pro and con, and it gets a lot more dicey when you get into other areas. When it comes to health research, I have found that Republican Democrats are on the same page, so it's a lot easier to develop those connections and advocate for your position. That being said, it is really paramount to find the right person in each individual office that you need to connect to, and make sure that if it's the district director or if it's even a field representative, because just like the DC office, the district offices have issue areas as well. We have field representatives that handle environment, healthcare, etc. And establishing those relationships, coming in and talking about, your individual stories, what has happened to you, how you want the congressman to be aware of the struggles and how the work that you're doing to make things better. And that is essential, because 9 times out of 10, the congressman or the congressperson is pulled in 15 million directions, and they have a very limited amount of time. So your first entry is to make that connection with the right person in the district staff, because they're the ones that are going to come to me. They're the ones that are going to say, we need to make sure we get the congressman to sit down and talk with these folks, because they have these important issues, that need to be addressed. A lot of times people call up and they've said, I want to talk to the congressman. I need to get in and see the congressman. And we say, look, the staff will be more than happy to meet with you, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you. And then we can get you in to see the congressman. One important thing I think is to remember when advocating or lobbying your district staff is each office is uniquely different. I like to say that there are 535 small companies in Congress, because of the 535, each member operates their office differently. There are some members that will take meetings with any constituent that calls up. There's some members that make sure that you have to go through a staff meeting first. Then there are some members that, will only take certain meetings on certain days. It all depends. So you need to understand the rhythm. You need to also understand the relationship that your member has with the community. Do a little bit of research before you come in and meet with the staff member or the congressman, because it is important to know where this congressman's issue areas are. My boss is very focused on infrastructure and American competitiveness. And healthcare it's research and education in the healthcare industry are very important to him, but his primary focus has always been on infrastructure and American competitiveness. So understanding where your member is coming from helps you to come in and talk to them in a better better way, because you might have to do a little bit more educating to the member than you would, let's say, somebody who is extremely passionate or been involved in healthcare as their primary, and research is their primary passion and what they're experts in. Understanding, the outreach that your folks do, that the member does, and the events that they're having. One of the things I would recommend is to show up at some of their events that they have, even if they're not related to your specific issue area. It's the more I get to see people, the more I see them at events or I talk to them, the more I'm more likely when they call to pick up the phone and take the call, or I'm more likely to say, hey, Lisa, I saw you at this event. How are things going? Check in and see what their lobbying efforts are going. And when they invite me to events, I get to, develop those relationships continually. One thing I think is important to remember when lobbying the congressional staff is a lot of times we are really inundated with numerous emails. I mean, my inbox explodes. So there's that, and I don't necessarily get back to everybody like within 24 hours. I wish I did. But it's sometimes I got to find that balance. And you guys, the important thing is to find the balance when following up with somebody like myself and just say, hey, Kevin, just want to follow up and make sure I got your email. And you got my email, excuse me. And persistence pays, but you don't want to go over the top. You don't want to get to the point where it's like, I can't talk to this person anymore. They've called 5 times in one day. And you're like, okay, I'm going to put them on the back burner. But finding that soft spot where you are making sure that you stay in the person's line of sight and they're aware of you, but not overdoing it, because there's a lot of different things that pull us in different directions. The one thing that I would also encourage you to do, and this is something you should, once you made contact with your district folks, they should be able to tell you who their counterpart is down on Capitol Hill. Reach out to them. If you're not able to visit DC, reach out to them and introduce yourself, or ask for an introduction from the district staff to the healthcare person down on the Hill, and make an introduction via email, or even pick up the phone and call them. And one thing that's also really important, and again, if this is not the person's interest area, if their interest area is something else, offer your knowledge, offer your experience, offer your stories to them and say, I'm here as a resource, because we have a lot of knowledge on a lot of different subjects, but it's about an inch deep. So if you can offer the policy person on the Hill and say, look, I have all of this information and this knowledge and this experience. I'm here for you. Let me know what I can do to educate you. That's invaluable. The other important thing that's really important is know when legislation is coming up. And know who is sponsoring legislation. We have a constituent that contacts us like the day of the vote. Okay, they tell us that your colleague, Mr. Harris, is pushing this legislation, and we have a Dear Colleague letter that's going around. Can the congressman get on the Dear Colleague letter, and can the congressman vote this way? The day of the vote. We don't have enough time to do our necessary due diligence to find out exactly what's in the bill, to run our traps and find out whether or not it's something that is advantageous or the right thing for us to do. Does it meet with the congressman's, political beliefs, etc. So know the legislative calendar, when the legislation's coming up. Make sure you alert the district staff, and then you alert the DC staff and say, hey, there's this bill that's coming up. We would love the congressman to sign on to this. We have been working with this member, and would you please make sure that you reach out to their legislative aide in healthcare and let them know you're interested in getting on this bill. And vice versa, if you're working with a specific office, tell let's say our office, tell our health aide, health legislative aide, to say, hey, look, would you please reach out to Mr. Harris's office, Mr. Van Hollen's office, or Mr. Cardin's office, and let them know we're reaching out to them and we'd like them to get onto this legislation or get onto this Dear Colleague letter. Being as proactive as possible and giving us as much lead time as possible to, work with other offices and get the member briefed is essential for us. So, and then with the member, once you start to develop the relationship with the member, it's always great to just come up and say to the member at events or anything, it's nice to see you, Congresswoman or Congressman. I appreciate the work that you did on this. Let the member know that you really appreciate the work that they did and the vote that they took. And then, it is also the member's responsibility to hear what you have to say. And he or she will greatly appreciate you coming in and providing this information to his staff and to them as well. It's a bit daunting right now, but this is the way things in politics right now. But relationships are essential, and relationships with the staff is what's going to keep your relationship with the member going, because the staff is the one that is going to, make sure that he sees the certain pieces of paper that comes in, that they go ahead and they evaluate the legislation that you want the member to sign on to. And, they're the ones that can get you schedule the time to meet with the member when they're in the district, and or put in a request if you want the member to come and speak to the group. If Lisa calls me up and I know the congressman's available, I'm going to make the best pitch to get the congressman to come and speak at this event if he's available, because Lisa and I have worked on developing this relationship for quite some time. And I know Lisa, I know what she's, her advocacy and her work, and I'm able to make that argument and that pitch that the congressman needs to show up. So I hope this is, helpful. Again, relationships nowadays with the members of Congress is, I think it's more important than ever. And you want to be able to be a soft sell. And I think that soft sell really comes with developing those strong relationships with the staff. And, through that, you develop that relationship with the member as well. Elaine, did I cover everything on this?
Sorry, Lisa, if I cut you off. From my perspective, yes, absolutely. Lisa, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, that was great, Kevin. Thank you so much for explaining about how the offices in the district and the Hill and the DC, how they connect with each other, and how ways and the value of the interactions and developing a relationship. Thank you. That was very, very helpful. So, Kevin talked a lot about all of those interactions, and I'm Lisa Peabody. I'm the Public Policy Associate, and thanks, Kevin, for all those plugs at me and all the work I'm doing. Is my boss on the phone? And so I'm going to talk a little specifically about how do you go about finding the information to send your members and your staff, and how technically what's the process for creating that relationship. So I call these interactions, we call them touch points. So when Kevin said that over time, the more kind of touch points you have, then he gets to know, or the staff member gets to know you and have a relationship with you. We recommend that you keep those emails that you send pretty short. I'd say 8 to 10 sentences is the max, but if you can, if you can slim it down to 3 or 4 sentences, that it's more likely to be prioritized. I think about my inbox, and he talked about his inbox exploding. And when you go to your inbox and there's so many emails, if you can kind of plow through something that's 4 or 5 sentences and respond with 4 or 5 sentences, then you prioritize and it gets done. And something that's a lot longer sometimes gets pushed further back. Also, Kevin talked about timing and, kind of finessing the timing about how often to reach out to your member. And we recommend about every 5 to 6 weeks. You can even start a log if you want that, what date and what you sent your member, and kind of keep track of it, because it's sometimes hard to remember when was the last time I emailed them. Don't be alarmed if they don't write you back, right away, as Kevin said, and you just keep at it, and eventually they get to you. We also have these action alerts that NBTS sends, so you get them in your inbox, and they are sort of a pre-written letter. And then you can add your story or your personal message in the bottom. So I know that we said to reach out every 5 to 6 weeks, but sometimes we're going to send you action alerts that might come in between that 5 to 6 weeks. So it's okay to throw in an extra interaction, an extra touch point, and respond to an action alert. And this also kind of ties into what Kevin said about knowing when legislation is upcoming. And so that piece of it, MBTS does that for you. So don't, you don't have to concern yourself necessarily with, where is my bill in the process? And is my member eligible to sign on? Because we do that for you. And that's what those action alerts, when they come in, that's exactly what they're asking. So don't get hung up on that. So you might be wondering how to find your members. So some of you I know on the phone have been to Head to the Hill and have participated and know your members, and others of you, this is kind of brand new. So you can go to www.house.gov and you'll find your representative. You have one representative, and then you can also go to senate.gov for your 2 senators who represent you. Unless you're in DC, then you only have one. Once you have found your member, so here's my member, here's John Delaney. This is a good chance for you to learn a little about him or her. Kevin mentioned that they all have kind of a background, a history of knowledge that they carry along with them. And so that helps you figure out where you fit in their portfolio. I look at the relationship as kind of like you're developing a new friend. And so if you have a new friend, you want to know, what are they interested in? What does your friend like to do? What does your friend like to talk about? And so you can learn that by looking at their website. So here's some tabs of a sample website. One is to look at their About tab or their biography. So for my congressman, he was a businessman, and he's interested in real estate and business development. And so I learned all that by hearing his history. He also has a family of veterans, so I know he's also involved in Veterans Affairs. I would also look at the news tab. So what's media writing about it? Is your member writing op-eds? Again, learning more about what your member is involved with at the time. Legislation is a good tab. You don't have to read all of the pieces of legislation that are listed in there, but you can see that there may be a pattern. Look at my member. He or she often leads legislation about veterans, or leads legislation about infrastructure, or leads legislation about health. And again, you kind of learn a little more about your friend and what he or she is interested in. There's also a spot where you can connect on social media, and Stephen's going to go into more detail about social media, but this is just a quick place where you can find their handle and connect with them on Facebook and Twitter. And then finally, you should definitely get in their mailing list, and usually there's a spot somewhere for you to sign up for their mailing list. So the other piece that Kevin talked about was the district office versus the Hill office or the DC office. When you're beginning these interactions, these touch points, Kevin said it was important to kind of find the right person. So you can give your local district office a call, and you can ask who their constituent services person is and get that information. You can do that also in the DC office, and in the DC office or the Hill office, you'll ask for the health legislative aid information, and go ahead and write both of them. And you might find that one is more responsive, so you can continue the relationship with that person. You might find you really don't have the time to develop the relationships with both of them, so pick one and do what you can. But if one you're not getting the response that you want from one, certainly reach out to the other. So now that you're ready to go, and you're all about your friend, and you know who to contact to speak with your friend, you're ready to start your touch points with your members. And so the first one is you're going to fill out the MBTS action alert. So right away, that's already a pre-made letter for you and that you can send. You can also follow up on that action alert a few weeks later and check in and say, did you get my action alert? Did you sign on to the dear colleague letter that I asked you to sign on to? And you can write that to either the district or the health LA, and they'll help funnel you to the right person. Remember, you want to keep this a short email, so just 3 or 4 sentences is perfect. Second, you can share your story. So maybe you've never met your member and they really don't know anything about you, or maybe you have already met your member, but either way, in a few sentences, you can say, hi, I met you at Head to the Hill. My name is Joe. Remember, I have a brain tumor. I'm doing really great. I'm able to work right now, and I just enrolled in a new trial, and I'm excited for what's ahead. Talk to you soon. Or introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Joe, and I live in Rolling Hill, and my wife has a brain tumor, and we'd love to meet with you one day. And so just that introduction is great. And then you can follow up again, because I'm saying keep these emails kind of short in a few weeks, in 5 or 6 weeks, and then say, hey, remember, my name is Joe, and I wrote you about my wife, and she's really doing great. She's out of the wheelchair. And that's, again, developing and connecting with this staff member. So what other touch points can you have? What other emails can you send? So you probably are on the NBTS mailing list, but hopefully, and then if you aren't, let us know, because we'll get you on that mailing list. But you can go straight to the NBTS website, and we often share lots of information about cutting edge treatments and what's happening in the brain tumor community and what researchers are doing. And sometimes we have a highlight on a special project we're doing. And there's, Kevin mentioned that you're the expert and that he is so interested in learning more about brain tumors, and you can help vet all of the massive information there is about brain tumors and pick particular content from our website, because we've already vetted that for you. We know that that's good and important information. Another thing I do, another way to find information that's going on in your town, you can go straight to our website, and you can see in that search engine, type in your state. So I would type in Maryland, and wham, I'll get all kinds of connections between NBTS and what's happening in Maryland. Sometimes there's a researcher in Maryland that writes a blog, or sometimes he talks about, Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland. So again, you can share, as Kevin mentioned, things that are happening, activities and events that are happening in your community. And they're so grateful to hear that type of information. You can also, give the link when you do that to our website. Or great. And then finally, this last group of touch points. So Kevin said that he's always trying to find out what's happening in his community. So you be that resource for your member. Go to your local newspaper, to your Washington Post, or to your, Iowa Review, and type in brain tumor, type in brain cancer, neuro-oncology, neuroscience. Even type in your member's name, Delaney, and you're going to come up with all kinds of information on brain tumors and neuroscience and neuro-oncology that's happening in your community. So even though it might not be your personal story, just saying, hey, did you see this this new, they're upgrading this new neuro oncology center, in the Iowa hospital, and they can't keep up with all that. So you be that resource to tell them those, exciting activities that are happening in your state. I had an experience where I was visiting with um, Congressman Sanford in South Carolina, and I was meeting with a staffer, and I had done this research, and I learned that a prominent real estate person in his community had recently passed. And so I mentioned to the staffer, and his face was white because he knew him really well, and he said, "Oh, that's a good friend of the congressman." And so right there, they went in and got Congressman Sanford, and talked a little bit about it. And I gave him the information I knew. And I had found that in the news before I had gone to that meeting. And so we had this deeper connection. He was so grateful so that he could reach out to that family. So I hope those are all kind of great activities that you can do, from the comfort of your home, online and email. And, adding to that, you can also do all kinds of touch points with social media. So I'd love to introduce our digital communications and marketing manager, Stephen, who's going to help you with some ideas for social media. Take it away.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody for being involved right now. It's really good to be able to speak to all of you, and I'll go pretty quickly. One of the things that I really appreciated to Lisa was she was able to show everyone that every member of Congress actually has their social media links on their page, and I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to follow them on social media, because there's a lot of conversations and dialogue that can be started there. They're not necessarily to take the place of a call or a letter to call to action, but it's a good way of keeping your communication year round. So first, I would say, obviously, you want to follow your members of Congress. They have a Facebook presence. They have a Twitter. Make sure that what you're doing, we're going to talk about how you can engage your friends and family also on these channels in order to advocate with you, and how you can share content from us. So we're going to go through that now. So if we want to go to the next slide, that would be excellent. So for example, one of the big things that we do with social media engagement, we often, as part of our action alerts and through the National Brain Tumor Society feeds, we actually are able to tell folks about various legislation and information that we want our elected officials to support. So being able to tell people with hashtags about the STAR Act, to use hashtags like BTSM or even brain tumors, with the links that you're sending, not only gets the message across to people that you're following, but to people who actually can look up those hashtags themselves. And this also helps with your interactions, as we'll see in just a little bit. We have some examples. So for example, one of the things that you can do, like, Lisa O'Leary, who's an amazing advocate for us, she, just even retweeting the things that we have helps boost the signal beyond just the following event, BTS. What I would recommend with that too, with your engagement. No, go ahead. That's fine. Retweeting, liking, and favoriting what's going on from your elected officials' feeds is extremely and vitally important. It's a great way to kind of foster that relationship. Sometimes what happens through social listening for our organization, as well as people in various other, congressional offices, is that these tweets, these messages are often saved and archived. So then you can see these fostered relationships. So say for example, Lisa's talking to her representatives. She's also following people like Senator Maggie Hassan up in New Hampshire. By putting those likes in, by putting those retweets, people say, oh, okay, they seem to be on board with what I'm talking about, and that engages in the conversation really well. One of the big heroes of mine on social media, especially for advocacy, is Matt Hansen. So one of the things that's really great is when boosting your network and kind of showing the progress that we're all trying to make with elected officials, being able to put up updates about what's going on with stuff like the Childhood Cancer STAR Act, or the oral chemo parity bills that have gone through, and also 21st century cures from last year. By putting that information in there, you're kind of showing that your messaging and your outreach does make a difference. So that's not only good for when you can, tag your elected officials, but for those people on your feed who otherwise don't know how to start, they're seeing that progress has actually borne some fruit. And it's a really good way to kind of convert more people over to also boost that signal. And, more voices that are talking about things that are based in science, are based in the need of our community, is never a bad thing.
Stephen, thank you so much. Hopefully you can hold on until our Q&A session. If people have questions for Stephen about social media, excuse me, feel free to chat them now, and we'll get them answered in our Q&A session.
Great, thanks, Casey.
Thank you. So Lisa and Stephen and Kevin all shared great information about how to connect and in online, and Kevin mentioned in-person events. If you're feeling motivated and want to take the next steps in your advocacy, here are a few in-person activities that can grow a more substantial relationship. They're more complicated and are a bigger ask, but that also means there is the potential for a bigger payoff. So we suggest that you attend your congressperson's local events, such as a town hall meeting. This is a great way to show that you're an active member of the community, and Kevin spoke about this earlier. The more consistently they can see you as a member of the community, and you can interact with the member and their staff, that makes a big difference in growing the relationship. So attend these events even if they're not focused on healthcare. Make sure you're prepared with a question that applies to you in the brain tumor community if you're able to ask that question. And then send a follow-up thank you note for the event. So even if you're not called on or able to participate, send a little thank you note saying that you were there, you appreciate the opportunity to interact with the member and their staff, and just continue to build a relationship through that. Another way for an in-person event is to set up an in-district meeting. So I mentioned this really briefly at the beginning of the webinar, but you can set up an in-district meeting with the member of Congress or their staff anytime throughout the year. And that really strengthens the relationship with the local offices and their members when they're home during congressional recess, which happens throughout the year and during the month of August for our members of Congress. So those are great times when they're on recess to try to schedule that in-district meeting. But as Kevin said, schedules don't always allow for you to meet the congressperson themselves. So and also he mentioned how important it is to build a relationship with the staffers. So you're encouraged to, if you're wanting to take that next step, is to schedule an in-district meeting with your members or their staff. And these can either be introductory meetings, to tell your story, share the experience of the brain tumor community and how legislation affects patients and their families, or you can talk about a specific piece of legislation, and we'll help guide through that. We have a handful of current pieces of legislation that we're supporting and need a push on. So there's always something to talk about, and there's a toolkit on our website, including a web training specifically for in-district meetings, and you can always contact us for assistance. My name is Casey, and you can email advocacy@braintumor.org. So finally, action items. So here are some touch points that we've covered today, and I won't necessarily read them out, but these are many of the different ways that you can connect with your members of Congress. So feel free to do any or all of these. They're all a great way to build that relationship and make sure you're keeping in touch throughout the year, and are concrete examples of how to do so. So we will move on to questions and comments. I saw some chats coming in throughout the web training. Lainey, do we have any questions for the team today?
There had been a question from Rebecca on tracking legislation, so I had suggested she try congress.gov, but to follow up with us if there's any more specific questions on bill numbers and all of that. And then, of course, we'll always keep people posted through our public policy updates that we send once a month that should have the latest on legislation. And then Patty Govin had mentioned that the role of state lead should be mentioned, is that a lot of that legwork is already done for building those relationships. So I had chatted back that yes, that's true. And just to call it out during the call, our state lead advocates, when we have those in states, they've built a lot of these relationships. So it is a good idea to check in with state lead advocates if you have one in your state, and Casey can help you figure that out if you're not sure, if you email her. And they do know a lot of the staff in the offices and can help you make those connections as well.
Thanks, Lainey. To know what bills are currently on our legislative agenda, of course, Lainey, the emails that we send throughout the year are monthly public policy and advocacy updates, as well as, action alerts for specific pieces of legislation are a great way to keep track of where a piece of legislation stands. And we also have our 2017 legislative agenda. I think it's on our alert, well, I was going to say alerts, polls, and updates page, but it's on our Your Voice page. And I think there's a direct link to the legislative agenda there.
And I'd like to add that, a lot of what we talked about today was not so much an ask of your member, but really just how to have a year-long conversation and friendship. As I said, they're your friend. And every time you write your friend, you don't say, let's go to coffee, or can you, do you want to go to dinner? You also just write your friend to check in. And so I know we've been thinking since Head to the Hill, if you went to Head to the Hill, that mostly when you meet with a member that you ask, have an ask, but that ask can be well supported if you've spent all year becoming friends. Just like it was so easy for me to ask Kevin to come to this webinar today.
That's a great point, Lisa. You don't always ask if you can help move boxes. You have to.
Yeah, can you help me move? It's
Exactly.
more what's your daughter up to, and how's work, and so you want to. That's the kind of relationship you want to develop throughout the year. So you can ask them to help you to move.
Exactly.
Casey, there is one more question that's come in about the best way to email a member of Congress that they have. I think a lot of people have probably seen those forms on their website, so you can fill it in. But our advocate here is saying that they seem very formal and they don't usually hear back from those. So are there better email addresses? So I think, and also we can open up this up to Kevin if he has a good suggestion for this. I guess our thought was that you could always call the office and ask for the contact person and ask for their email address.
Yes, that is the best way to do it, because going through the website and the whole formal process of, leaving a comment, it can be a bit daunting. And listen, most of, particularly your member, if you get the name of the person, it's really easy. Like for the House of Representative, it's kevin.mac@mail.house.gov. So find their first name and last name, and 90% of the time, that's their email address. If you can find out who the issue area person is. There are a couple of them that you might have to check, but call, and once you've talked to the person that handles healthcare issues, then go ahead and ask them for their email address, and then that's your first step right there. Because I know when Lisa's contacted me, if she's wanted to invite the congressman to an event, I've just forwarded directly to our scheduler, and and quite honestly will pay attention to me a lot quicker than any other requests that come in through the formal way. So that's my recommendation.
And I think, Casey, it's slide number 13. And on slide number 13, if you want to put that up, it shows how you can call to get those particular information. Do you see 13? Yeah, there you go. So when they're in district, that you can ask who was the constituent services, and not every office is called constituent services, but that should give them a framework. And then also, if you called the Hill office, you ask for the health legislative aid contact. And we keep referring back to congressmen just because Kevin's here and we're focused on congressmen today. But all of this information is applicable to both your one congressman and your two senators. So make sure that, given that we haven't said the word senator, we're including those two members as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Lainey, are there any other questions that have come in?
None others have come in, so if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to chat them now.
All right, if you have a question that comes up later, please feel free to send us that email at advocacy@braintumor.org. And just a note, we have recorded this, as I said, and we'll be sending out an email to all of our advocates who are signed up to receive emails from us. And we'll also include some notes and some bullets from this presentation in case you have any questions about what might have been said during the presentation. And so if you're furiously taking notes, if you missed anything, we'll send a couple notes along with it. And also we'll post this webinar to our website like we have done in the past for our previous webinars. I'm seeing a bunch of chats come in, Lainey. I don't know if we have more questions that we should answer now.
There was just one that seemed to still be a question. Others are saying thanks, so that's great. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for everyone that spoke who did a great job today. One question was, how impactful or important are the stories about our deceased family members? And I think that we can all agree that those are very impactful and very important to your members of Congress, and they can really make that connection as to why change needs to be made for the brain tumor community. So if anyone else has any feedback on that as well, but that was the one other question that came in.
Yeah, I want to say that they're equally as important. Neither one is more important, because stories of loss and pain are equally as important as stories of inspiration.
Agreed.
Both of those, connect with a person on all levels.
Thanks, that's a great question. All right, well, thanks everyone. Thank you to our special guests, Kevin and Stephen, for joining us and sharing some insight about your roles and some insider tips and tricks. And thanks everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Lisa and Lainey. And have a great rest of your day.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.